Welcome to this episode of The Meaning Mindset with Rabbi Ron. I am, of course, your host, gratefully, Rabbi Ron Lee Paz. And this episode brings somebody extraordinary into the studio and into your thoughts, into your life. I want to read a little about my guest today, Abbie Schiller. Abbie Schiller is a goal and life coach with a passion for empowering people to live with purpose and clarity. Abbie combines years of experience in personal development and practical strategies to help her clients define and reach their goals. She believes that by setting clear intentions and taking actionable steps, anyone can transform their lives and achieve meaningful growth. Abbie's unique approach blends goal setting with a focus on personal values, making her a sought-after guide for those looking to make an impactful change in their lives. We're excited, I'm very excited, to dive into Abbie's insights and learn more about her journey as a coach. Let's join Abbie Schiller. You think about loving your life, liking your life, but your focus right now is on liking your life. How do you differentiate? Why do you make that distinction?
So I was very deliberate in naming the program Like Your Life and in thinking about liking your life. I think a lot of people don't like their lives. And going from a place of overwhelm or loneliness or underwhelm about your life to loving your life feels very aspirational and out of reach. And I think that the goal over a lifetime is to have lived a life that you have liked. If you have moments of loving it, awesome. There will inevitably be moments of deep pain and despair and worry as well. That's unavoidable as a human. But I think the goal is to like your life, is to live a life that you like, that you're proud of, that you feel good in.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I think about the distinction between happiness a lot, the goal of the pursuit of happiness, all the bumper sticker smiles, and us constantly asking our kids, are you happy, are you happy, are you happy? Which I think is passing. There are moments, but then I stub my toe. How happy can I be?
Yeah.
So contentment feels more reachable, sustainable, attainable.
Happiness is a peak state, and it's not a sustainable emotion. So if you think about all feelings are vibrations in our body. And it's so funny because happiness, as an example that you just named, is so ingrained culturally with us, right? The pursuit of happiness, happy birthday, happy whatever, are you happy? I just want my children to be happy. It's really in our zeitgeist, in our DNA. And yet it is really, if you ask, as I do for my clients, how often do you want to feel happiness? And most of them say, 90, 100%. And I'm like, well, that's super weird.
Yeah.
That's super weird because if somebody were to die or if there was hardship, you wouldn't want to feel happy. And I had somebody ask me a question yesterday that was so profound. I was struggling with something and they said, would you want to feel anything other than this struggle? And the answer was no. It's appropriate for me to be feeling struggle right now. And it's appropriate to feel happy at some times, but not at others. And so, yes, you're right. Contentment is a great goal for our lives to have kind of a touch base, an even moment, and know that there will be ups and there will be downs, but to come back to contentment, I think, is a beautiful aspirational goal.
Yeah. If you go to the doctor and they give you an EKG, right, and you see the scope. Yeah. I think all of that there's another line above it, which is life, right? But it's changing constantly, on the internal level. I think if we look at the map of your life or mine to any point, even at the end, we'll probably see the same thing. Yeah. That there were some deep lows and some midway lows, and there were some highs that were momentary, encountering somebody that made you smile, think differently, eating a meal that makes you feel good about food, and not the price of it these days. But then you start to go, but that's all in the course of a good life. One thing that I've been thinking about with that pursuit of happiness is it's a great quote. It's a bumper sticker quote from history. And I like the idea that here you come to this country where you can pursue whatever brings you happiness. But I think even the author would have said, It's a byproduct of something else.
Well, and the problem with it also is that we think something's wrong or going wrong when we're not in that state. We think that when we are struggling or feeling disappointed or embarrassed or angry, we think something has gone wrong. And we're
failing at life in that moment.
It just isn't the case. I mean, no matter what, you cannot self-help your way out of, you cannot success your way out of, you cannot beautify yourself out of a human experience. And a human experience is roughly 50% hardship and 50% ease. And that is kind of the ingredients of all lives. There is no life without struggle, and there is no life without joy. And so together, we can normalize that. It doesn't mean that there's something going wrong if you're having a low few months, if you're really struggling with something. Now, I do believe in eliminating unnecessary suffering. We often compound on ourselves unnecessary struggle. So for instance, I have a lot of people in my life who say, well, I'm really upset about this, and I'm upset that I'm upset.
Yeah. Why does this bother me so much?
Why haven't I figured this out by now is another thing that they'll say.
Yeah.
Why haven't I figured this out by now? Why is this so hard for me? It's like, it's hard, and then you're making it harder by that thought.
Right. And blaming yourself.
Yeah. And it's like compounded unhappiness or compounded misery. We can eliminate that level of it. And that's thought work. That's what I do as a coach. I help people understand the way their thoughts are and the results that they're creating in their lives.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because I witnessed it, via Zoom a couple days ago, and I want to tell you what I experienced. And before that, I was thinking about a book that I read in my 20s. Again, we read these books at the wrong time, and then we read them again at the right time. And a great friend of mine said to me, basically, I remember his handwriting. I don't remember exactly what he wrote, but he was a comedy writer in London. I was living there. I know you can relate to that in your family.
Yeah.
And he wrote something like, this is the Bible, this is it, meaning there's so much wisdom in this book. And we weren't religious at all at that point in our lives. And I got what he was saying, and I read it. It was M. Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled. Uh-huh. And in the intro, or in the first pages, maybe the first paragraph, if I'm remembering correctly, Peck says, essentially, life is difficult. Period. As soon as we understand that life is difficult, life is easier, more manageable, more bearable.
Yeah.
And I thought about that a lot, that childhood prepares us in many ways, depending on how we're living it and how we're being raised by our parents, to believe that we shouldn't get scrapes. Those are anomalies. We shouldn't get angry and upset. That's when life betrays us. And yet he's saying, but from an adult perspective, at some point you're going to meet on the road and realize life is challenging. It's difficult being human.
Yeah. In The Princess Bride, I think they yelled, life is pain.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have said versions of that, whether it's the Buddhists or the Hasidim or, as you say, good pieces of art, good writing, good coaches and therapists as well.
Yeah. So our thoughts I have found in coaching and in my practice and in all of the readings that I've done, in that there's really 5 things in life.
Okay.
5. There's our circumstances, which are our facts, things that happen outside of us or sometimes to us that are facts. There's nothing subjective about a circumstance. It's the number on the scale.
It's what happened. It's what's
sometimes,
reflected.
Yeah. It could be something that somebody said to you. It's a sentence that somebody says to you. It's the number in the bank account. It's, something that has happened. Sure. Then we have a thought about that circumstance, which interprets that circumstance. So when we were kids, we were taught, oh, Johnny made you angry. Johnny didn't make you angry. Johnny did something neutral, a neutral circumstance. You had a thought about it, and your thought made you angry.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have done that, might have been the thought that you thought about what Johnny did. So we have a thought. This thought is a sentence in our brain, and then we have a feeling, which is a vibration in our body. The thought creates the feeling. That is really important for people to understand. We create how we feel from how we think. When we feel something, we then either take action or we avoid taking action. And then from that, we create a result. This is work that was done by Brooke Castillo. She's a life coach. She runs the Life Coach School. And it's based from lots of other bits of information. You might recognize it from cognitive behavioral therapy. There's a lot of other theories that kind of combine these things. But that's it. So if you want to change something in your life, or if you don't like something in your life, it comes from one of those 5 things. Either it's a circumstance, I want to change my job, I want a different relationship, I need to move towns, whatever it is. It's a thought, I don't like the way I think about myself, I don't like the way I think about my partner, I don't like the way I think about the world right now. It's a feeling, I'm feeling depressed, lonely, upset, angry all the time like a victim. It's an action, I don't like that I overdrink, I don't like that I over Netflix, over scroll, whatever. Or it's a result. And an example of a result might be I under-earn, I am unhealthy, I am, unhappy.
Yeah.
And those are the 5 things. And when you can, that's called the model. And when you can kind of you can plug in your situation in any of those and understand so much more than what most people understand about their lives.
So don't we approach that model of 5 from different places?
Yeah.
Sometimes we start with the result and say, why am I here?
Yeah.
Or this gets me so feeling angry, upset, disheartened. Sometimes you look at the Johnny did this to me, the circumstance, and stay there, never get to number 3 or 4 or 5.
So let me just correct you on that, because the circumstance isn't Johnny did this to you. That's actually a thought. Fair enough. It could be that Johnny did hit you, right? Or Johnny did not invite you to his birthday party for kids. Right. But the thought is he shouldn't have done that, right? That was mean of him. Or whatever, our kid minds would have thought by then. Or our parents would have told us. Yeah. And then the feeling is rejected. And then when we feel rejected, we withdraw. And then when we withdraw, we aren't invited to the party.
Okay. So let's use another example. We just went through a national election.
Yep.
In the U.S., I know people are watching this. I see comments from other countries saying, you mentioned the World Series. How come Australia isn't in it? Whatever people are saying, don't only think in the territory in which you live. That's right. There's certain things that are universal, though. We're affected by things that happen in our world. Mm-hmm. And you're saying that's the circumstance. Mm-hmm. You can't change that. Mm-hmm. The job you might be able to change. Say, I don't like this circumstance. I'm moving. You could move to New Zealand and change the circumstance too. Mm-hmm. But then to move from the circumstance of, let's say, the person elected now or any 4 years in this country, mm-hmm. then I have my reaction to it. No, I'm going to go to my thought, which is, I think this is the best or worst thing in the world. Mm-hmm. Or could my thought be, I feel so anxious. Well, that's a feeling.
But it could also be a thought.
I feel like I don't know. We're in a moment of flux. Mm-hmm. Let's say that's my statement of thought. Mm-hmm. I feel like I don't know what tomorrow will hold.
That's right.
And then the feeling is...
And by the way, you never did know what tomorrow would hold.
Right. That's, by the way, that always helps me.
Does it?
In referring back to all the other times when we were like, okay.
You've never known what would happen tomorrow, and you never will.
Yeah. I thought you said that really beautifully the other day as well.
Oh, good.
And I thought all these people who are joining on that call saying, how do I live in this moment with these circumstances?
Yeah.
You gave us clarity.
Okay.
I love that there was literally a schematic, a map, letters, move from this to this to this in your process. You did that a couple times.
Yeah.
It was very pragmatic.
And by the way, if anybody listening wants to get this, I have a free teaching that's available to them called Change One Thing. And I teach this model in that video. So it's available for free on my website.
I thought you talked about the video that you have, which I'm going to watch, partially because I need more time with these ideas.
Yeah, it is
it's
a language.
It's not a one and done.
It's true. It's like learning a new language, and you have to become a little fluent in it, but with a little practice, you start living your life and seeing it. So you can go to a meeting and be like, wow, they have lots of thoughts about this.
Yeah.
Or you can listen to your child come home from school and think he's got some big feelings going on right now. Mm. And it really is just like a beautiful framework to live life with.
So take me through it again. You start with circumstance. We'll call it C, the letter I see in bold.
Yep. Circumstances are facts.
Yeah.
Indisputable. They would hold up in a court of law. Then from that circumstance, we interpret it with a thought. And it's important, actually, because most people were never taught how to determine thoughts from facts. We think our thoughts are always true. We don't question our thoughts. We have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and we believe them. And thought work is the art of learning how to watch your thought instead of just accept it.
Okay.
It's like meditative, like you're literally you're sitting in a window watching cars drive by. Your thoughts are the cars. And you're like, oh, that one's not going to serve me. Oh, I'm going to choose that one. That one will serve me. And, there's a lot of misconception about choosing thoughts and kind of living in this fake, toxically positive world. That is not the point. That is not the point of coaching. That is not any reputable point of any kind of practice. The point is to be conscious, aware, and intentional of the life that you're creating with your thoughts and the results that you want. So it is appropriate to feel despair. It is appropriate to feel frustration, rage, anger, fear. It is human to feel all of those things. But it's helpful to feel those things intentionally, knowing that your thoughts are creating those feelings and that if you need to think about it differently, you can. You are able to.
What's an honest thought change, let's say, from the despair that's in response to something that you read on social media?
For sure. So I like to ask the question, is this true? What else could be true? And I think that just gives you a little bit of a second to pause and reflect, because our brains are designed to keep us safe. It's their job. And so we're on the lookout for danger. Scary things will hold their clutches in our brain at a heavier weight than joy or ease. And so we have to kind of react to that. And by the way, we're feeding ourselves fear all day long.
Right? Mostly. Right.
Our attention, if you're on social media, if you're reading the news, I guess those are really kind of the two main things.
Yeah.
But those two things really, in a way that the human brain has never had to process information like this before, we are digesting the height of the Statue of Liberty daily in images and information, 2.5 inches at a time, all day long, of our brain needing to process, oh, is this dangerous? Do I need to know this? What could happen? And it's exhausting. And so you have to ask yourself, is this true? What else could be true? And you can do that not just for what you see on social media, but for any thought you have. Oh, the world is going to hell, let's say, or the world is falling apart.
Right.
Is that true? Well, it feels very true. Right? We've got global warming, we've got war, we've got crisis, we've got division. But is that really true? Really?
Verifiably true.
Verifiably true. The world has always had turmoil. We haven't always had climate crisis. We haven't always had
the leaders that we have, the dynamics that we have.
But there has always been turmoil and suffering and challenge, right? I love the story that Elizabeth Gilbert told me that
she wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
She wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She wrote Big Magic. She's written like 10 enormous bestsellers. And she wrote a book she told a story to me about a book that she wrote about a Russian family that moved to Siberia. And they raised their family in isolation, and then they moved out of isolation. It was this beautiful novel that took her 10 years to write. And she flew to London to release the book and went to sleep. The next day was the big interview, and she woke up and her publicist said, "You're blowing up on Twitter," which she said that's never a good thing. Oh. And so she went to go see what was happening. And in fact, most of Ukraine was saying, not most of Ukraine, that's not accurate, but many people in Ukraine were saying, please do not release this book. It will harm us.
Oh, wow.
And other people were piling on saying, how dare you? You should be canceled. You should be ashamed of. Everybody had lots of thoughts. And that's how I would see it. Lots of thoughts aimed at her.
Yeah.
And she had a meeting with her team and they had to make a decision that morning. And so she felt in fight or flight. Her nervous system was dysregulated. And so she had to take an hour. And so she went to her hotel room and she took a bath and she needed to make a decision. And the first question she asked herself is, what is the thought that I'm having? The thought that I'm having is that everyone right now is attacking me. And then she asked herself, is it true? And she said, yes, it's true. Look at them on the internet. They all want to cancel me. Nobody wants to hire me. My career is doomed, all of this. But then she asked, and this came from Byron Katie, who's a great author and philosopher, is it really true? And there she was in her 5-star hotel in a bathrobe, having just taken a bath with room service on her bed. And she said, nobody's attacking me. Nobody's actually attacking me.
Right.
And that calmed her down enough to be able to make a sound decision. And her decision, which she arrived at, I think by asking, what's the right thing to do, was to put the book on hold, to put the book release on hold, put it in a vault and not release it. Because she felt that book release might cause harm to other people, which I actually think was the right decision for her, even though after 10 years of working on a project must have been a really challenging decision for her. But when we can look at our thoughts, ask ourselves what else is true, what else could be true, and then connect with our integrity, our values, which for her is to cause no harm and to live in integrity for others, serve others. I think that there's real value in living a life that way, even if it doesn't go the way you want, which for her in that moment, it didn't, but ultimately it did.
Yeah, that's a great, true story. It's also a good illustration of what you've been saying in terms of, I think anybody listening to the story could identify the different elements of it. What were circumstances? What were thoughts in response to them? Certainly what were feelings.
And then what was her reaction?
And then action or reaction.
Yeah.
And the result. And the result might be complicated because results they're not linear.
Yeah.
I think you have probably in her case, people angry with her, people disappointed in her because their success relies on that release date.
And those are their thoughts.
Yeah.
Those are their thoughts. And you can see them as, well, my publisher is going to have lots of thoughts about this.
Right.
And yet, I think that when we live lives full of integrity, we create opportunities for ourselves and for others. So even though she may have had to cancel that one thing,
or delay,
Yeah, for sure. That story speaks to a person that many other people aspire to know, to learn from, and may make her next book even more successful.
Right.
We don't know.
Yeah.
And we may have a leader right now that we don't agree with, but it may bring about things that we don't know that we do agree with.
Yeah. Do you know the story about the old man, the farmer, and the horse?
I do.
That's such a great story.
Yeah.
And I shared it at some point in the season. But to recap it beautifully, I should say succinctly, he has this favorite horse, cherished horse. Somebody leaves the gate open. The horse bolts. Everybody comes to say, this is awful. He goes, maybe. The horse comes back with 10, 12 other horses. And everybody comes to him saying, this is fantastic. And he says, essentially, it could be.
Maybe.
And then his son gets on one of the wild horses and gets injured. And everybody says, this is awful. And he says, it could be. And people presumably are puzzled as they are now thinking about the story. Yeah. And ultimately the men of the town and of the kingdom go off to war, except the son can't because of that injury. And I think about that so often. We're in the middle of a story always.
Yes.
We're never at the punctuation point, maybe a comma. Maybe that's the best way to think about life. Where am I in this comma, in this moment?
Yeah.
Between stability and instability, that's the nature of life. Don't you think we maybe over-cherish stability? Think again that that's the norm, that's what life should offer us?
I think that we don't like to feel discomfort.
Yeah.
I think that we will do anything to avoid the feeling of discomfort, of uncertainty, again, it goes to the brain of wanting certainty, of wanting safety. But if you think about feelings as vibrations, how many people don't go for the dream that they have of writing a book or asking someone out or going for the job that they wanted because they don't like the feeling of fear, which is simply a vibration of a tightness in your throat, maybe rapidly beating heart, clenchingness of your body, right? So if you were to say, as I hear all the time, well, I didn't ask that person out because I didn't want to feel tightness in my throat. It's ridiculous.
It is.
It sounds ridiculous when you talk about it like that. And so I think that for you, yes, to answer to your point, people don't like to feel discomfort. And so we want certainty. We want it to be steady and even. But when we learn how to trust ourselves, that we can feel these vibrations and get through them. And in fact, by practicing feeling terror or fear, we become more fearless. We normalize that. Oh yeah, here it is, my cottony mouth or my palmy hands or whatever. That's terror. Okay, keep going.
Right. Yeah, another way of thinking about it maybe is that's what I need to be me in this moment, or even to succeed in this moment.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to push it away. Like I get up in front of people constantly, and there's never a time when I'm not nervous. Always. I've been doing this for a number of years.
And you do it anyway.
And I do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I know that whatever I'm feeling and the sweat on my brow and the changed heart rate that I'll have this evening or any other time is part of what I need to do something well. Maybe it gives me an advantage of heightened awareness or humility as well, by the way, vulnerability. Sure. I think that's good as well.
Yes. By the way, those are your thoughts that help you move through that feeling. This might be an advantage. Or this, I sometimes think when I feel fear before I speak publicly, I'm like, this is my process.
Yeah.
This is my body trying to keep me safe. I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
But those thoughts are for you. Like you can identify the thoughts that create the fear. They're judging me. I'm vulnerable. I might make a mistake.
Sure.
But also you're doing it. So you somewhere have a thought that says, I got this.
Yeah. I was an opera singer, and I remember being in London, going on stage. Can't remember if it was in a musical or in an opera. And sometimes I was thinking, you're nervous. Some of it is reframing, right? I was at the Royal Albert Hall, and I was under the floor about to come up opening night to a full theater. Orchestra's playing, red light on, don't go up yet. And there's another singer, he and I are going to come out. And I'll never forget. And I'm saying my prayers, and he's saying his prayers. I see him doing all these strange things, taking from a water bottle water and sticking it up his nostrils and, making the sign of the cross. And at one point, I remember watching that and going, this is crazy. We're acting like gladiators. Somebody's going to die up there. Instead of thinking we get to do this.
Yeah.
We were flown across the world to sing here.
Yeah.
These people paid because they only want us to be successful.
Yeah.
It's not a gladiator.
Yes.
And I think we do have power to change our thoughts.
Yes. And let me just point out that the only difference between feeling nervous and feeling excited is how you think about it. Because those two emotions are the same vibration in your body. That's it. The same exact vibration for nervousness and excitement. The only difference is how you think about it.
Did you ever read or hear about Kelly McGonigal's work?
No.
She's I'm forgetting what kind of psychologist she is. In San Francisco, there's a TED Talk that's fantastic. And I saw it years ago, and it was essentially this. It says, here are the arteries of two people. One who thinks stress is bad for him and one who thinks it's good for him. And you see that the walls of the arteries on the person who thinks it's bad for them have expanded and there's less blood flow.
Yeah.
And the person who thinks that stress is good has essentially an unchanged aperture.
Yeah. I mean, mind-body is...
Isn't that amazing?
Yes, of course. And that is why thought work and self-awareness is life-saving in so many cases. And determines the experience we have in liking our lives. Mind work, take the pandemic, for instance. We all went through a pandemic. Some people thought this is the worst thing that has ever happened to me. Right. And some people thought there's an opportunity in here for me.
For sure.
Who survived? Who thrived? The people who had the thought that there was an opportunity in this. It doesn't mean that they were completely in a toxic positive land. They just saw opportunity.
Right.
And back to Viktor Frankl is hope is possible always. And so when we learn how to feel and think on purpose, with intention, in integrity, we can live the lives that we are meant to live. We can serve others. We can show up for ourselves and our families. We can be the best we can possibly be when we can think on purpose. But when we are at the mercy of the 60,000 thoughts that come at us, or when we are spending our days consuming other people's thoughts, when our attention has been hijacked by other companies and other people, we cannot serve anyone. So it's super important, especially during challenging times, to get a grip on how we think and how we want to think. What results do we want to create for ourselves and in this world? When
did you get this?
It's a good question. Did it become your
answer because it was your question?
There's a funny story. When I was, I think 8, I would be driven around Los Angeles. I grew up here in LA. And, I'd be driven to school. It wasn't like I had a chauffeur, but my mom would drive me around and I would, she was my chauffeur. I would roll down the window and stick my head out the window and yell at people on the sidewalk. Do you like your life? And then adults in the, late 70s, early 80s would yell back at me, no. And as a child, I was fascinated to think, what's so hard about adulting? Y'all can choose your own bedtime. Mm-hmm. I have no agency. You have agency. You can eat whatever you want. You can have dessert whenever you want. What is so bad about adulting? And then I grew up and realized that there are a lot of unhappy people. I was determined to figure it out. From that time when people were like, no, I hate my life, to a kid.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, that's not going to be me. I'm going to figure this one out and I'm going to teach other people. And I literally think I became a life coach in that moment. And I've spent my career not as a coach. I was in PR for many years, but I was helping companies live their best lives. And I was helping, I worked with Barbara Walters for a time and I helped her and I worked with, incredible people. And then I started my own company called The Mother Company with a partner. And our mission was to help parents raise good people by teaching children how to understand their feelings and thoughts. So I think I've always been doing this.
Yeah, sounds like it.
It feels very...
There wasn't CCTV camera at that time. There wasn't that technology. But otherwise, we'd have images of you going, do you like your life?
Yes, for sure.
How do you teach this to a kid? Without it just being language?
Yes. So I think that we have to, such a good question, because I think that so often we teach the opposite to kids. Get up, you're fine, right? Oh, don't be so sad. You've got a lot to be happy about. And and a lot of us were taught that too. I mean, very few of us understand emotional literacy. We really don't. When I send every client that comes to work with me, I send a little sticker that has kind of a chart of feelings. And adults read this because they've never considered some of these feelings. And
what are some of them? What are some of the more obscure ones that people didn't know that?
Unseen.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Unseen is such a common feeling for people.
Yeah.
That we do not have a common name for. When was the last time you said, I felt unseen? Yeah. But so many people feel invisible in their own homes.
Right.
In their own families. So when you ask about how to teach this to children, it starts with modeling it yourself. Adults need to model this themselves. And then from there, they can teach kids, you know what, babes, I'm feeling super frustrated right now. And when I feel frustrated, I want to walk out of the room. Mm-hmm. And so I think it'd be best for me just to take a minute and I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Model it.
Yeah.
Use your words.
So they start to see, going back to your letters that I see, they see your circumstances.
Yeah. Well, they see your feelings first,
they may
probably.
see your circumstances before you articulate them, maybe.
Yeah.
If they're knowable to them.
Yeah, for sure. If they've just had a fit or if they're refusing to go to bedtime, they know the circumstance. And
then they see you as an adult
reacting to it. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And what's so great about that is you can talk it out. right? Like there are plenty, I have 2 kids. And when they were growing up, I would say, hey, I'm starting to feel at my limit of frustration right now. If I feel more frustrated, I might yell, and I don't want to yell.
Yeah.
So let's take this down a notch, right? I'm not ready to talk about it right now, but I need to take a minute, and I would take a minute, and I would model getting frustrated. It's super weird when adults are like, never want to get angry in front of their kids or never lose it. I mean, we're humans.
Right.
And to expect anything except that feels unfair to the adults. And then what are we teaching kids? Like, you should never be upset. But instead, let's teach them how to be upset. I wrote a book with my partner called When Miles Got Mad. It's unfortunately out of print right now, but it's such a great book because it teaches children to use your words. It's a story about a little kid who his little brother breaks his favorite plane, and he starts to lose it at his brother. His brother leaves the room, and he turns into the mirror and sees this monster. And it's his anger personified. And together, he's afraid by this little monster in the mirror, and the monster is a little afraid about him. And they're like, well, why don't you tell me, what's making you so mad at the end? And it helps him learn how to use his words. Well, my brother broke my favorite plane. And as he's using his words, the monster shrinks and becomes more transparent and goes away eventually.
And eventually sees the boy in the mirror.
And he has his own reflection back. And he realizes that when he can talk about it, it can be managed.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
So how do you work with clients now to where you're seeing that they're seeing results, sustainable results, not one-off? What are you seeing with your clientele?
So coaching is a very different process than something like therapy. So coaching is you come to a coach, or at least you come to me as a coach, and you design the result that you want within this series. If I'm doing one-on-one coaching, I also do a lot of group courses as well. Same thing. You decide what you want as a result, and then you make a plan for it. And then week by week, we go through all of the obstacles that stand in your way of that plan. Most of the obstacles are in your own head. Most of the obstacles are fear or confidence or your belief that you weren't good at it before, so you're not going to be good at it again, or some limiting belief, right? Some thought that is holding you back. And each time we can kind of bust through those obstacles and give you a thought to think on purpose that you need to practice. Because remember, you've had decades thinking a thought.
Of course.
And so you need to rewire that pattern. Every time you look in the mirror, you have a negative thought about yourself. You have to rewire that pattern. And it's, maybe you want to get to the thought of, I love my body, from the thought of, I hate my body, but you can't. So you have to choose a neutral thought first. I have a body. I have a body. And you can believe that, right? Everybody can believe that. And then you step by step work towards the belief that you want. I have an able body.
I was just going to say, okay.
You could do, I have an able body. I have a healthy body. I have a body that gave birth. I have a body that's capable of this. I have a body that continues to work, even though I'm sometimes mean to it. I have appreciation for the fact that my body keeps doing its thing. It's possible other people might like my body just as it is. Like, you can choose also, there's some magic words that you can put before or after any sentence that kind of make it believable.
Like, it's possible.
It's possible is one of them. I wonder is another one.
Yeah,
At the end of a sentence is, and that's okay. So even if you hate your body, you could say, I hate my body right now, and that's okay. It eases it just 1%.
Right.
1%.
Brings a little peace to your heart.
Little piece. And so we just step by step do thought work together to eliminate the obstacles, to learn the tools, and to get where the person wants to go. It's such magical, meaningful work.
Yeah, it is.
And it works. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I feel like you're doing really important work. And as you say, it's very different from good psychotherapy.
Yeah.
It's also built on this notion that we have more agency than we give ourselves credit for.
Yes.
And that you as a coach, like any coach at the side of a baseball player, are saying, I can see in ways that you can't see perhaps. I give you tools that you can't, and techniques that you may not have.
And that's my job. So a lot of people come to me in a theoretical trench. They've dug themselves into a trench, or they've somehow fallen into a trench. And my job is to stand on the shores or on the horizon, on the banks, and to see the horizon.
Yeah.
And to let them know that there is horizon, and I see it for you, and I'm going to hold belief that you're going to get here until you can hold it for yourself.
Do you work with grief at all?
I do.
I mean, I know you do as a concept because
I do work. I have been doing quite a bit of grief work lately, actually, and it's beautiful, important. I mean, we all know the result, right? We all have the result of death in our lives. That is the ultimate result that we are all going to experience.
Yeah.
And so when other people have death that they've experienced in their lives, and they're really struggling around acceptance of it, and they're really struggling with their thoughts about it, it's so important to look at those thoughts. In fact, just today in a session, I asked, do you want to think about your father's death in any other way than you currently think about it? And the answer was no. And just to have the agency to decide, no, I do want to think about it this way, shifts it a little bit. It gives you the agency. It gives you power. It gives you compassion for yourself, for the experience that you're going through. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that you empower the child at any age to know, oh, I can choose thought.
Yeah.
You know, we feel powerless over that because we're tormented by thought, we're kept awake by thought, rather than feeling like, oh, actually, that's also a choice.
Yeah. You don't have to be kept awake by thought, and you don't have to ruminate about thought. I think that we forget that we have a lot of control over the thoughts that we choose. And it's a little bit like weightlifting. If you've never been to the gym and you pick up a 10-pound weight, it's going to feel very heavy. But if you start with the 1-pound weight and work your way up to the 10 and then the 20 and then the 50, I don't even weightlift, but like whatever it goes in, then it becomes much easier. You acclimate to the weight of it and to the muscle grows. Yeah. It's the same thing with thought work. The first piece of it is becoming aware of your thoughts. You have to you cannot change anything you're not aware of. So if you have, thoughts about your body or thoughts about the world ruminating in the back of your head every time you look at something or experience something, or first of all, you're going to have cognitive bias. You're going to see it a lot more because your brain will always look for proof that that is true. So if you have no awareness of it, you're going to be experiencing it a lot more. Once you have awareness of it, then you can start getting a grip around it. Then you can start noticing how often, how impenetrated, is that even the right word? What's the word?
Impenetrable.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. But I like that.
How all-encompassing it is in your life.
Of course. And
then you can start to interrupt that thought. So there's actually a tool that I teach called AID, A-I-D. It's an acronym. Awareness for A, interrupt for I, and D, decide how you want to think. Yeah. AID. It's a very simple tool for anybody who's ruminating.
Since I learned that from you.
Yes.
A couple of days ago.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times I've tried to work out how many toes I feel.
Okay. So let me put that in context. So the way to interrupt a thought is, everybody do this. Everybody listening, if you're not driving, do this. So when you have a thought, you become aware of it, and then you want to interrupt it. There's a number of ways that you can interrupt it. One of the ways is by throwing your awareness into your feet and noticing how many toes you can feel. So everybody do this. And most of us can't feel all 10 toes. It's bizarre. I'm sure most people have never thought about this. But what you're doing when you're trying to feel how many toes you have is not thinking about whatever you were just thinking about a second ago.
Creating a space in your brain.
Yeah, you're just interrupting it. It's as if a toddler had been running around in your head holding scissors, and you took the scissors away and told the toddler to sit down. That is what you did with your thought, because you just threw your attention somewhere else, and now you're focused elsewhere. And now you have just that kind of 3-second gap of awareness where you can then decide, oh, I'm not going to think about the doom and gloom. I'm going to decide to think the thought that I chose instead, which is, it's possible that things can work out. Or a thought perhaps like, what do I need to focus on right now? Or a thought that could be, right now I am safe. And you can choose all sorts of thoughts, but you have to do the feel test, that you have to try on a thought and make sure that it feels right.
So it's not random.
You don't want to force yourself into a thought. I never want somebody to give a fake, false thing that they don't actually believe is true. That will not work.
That's like going from I hate my body to I love my body.
Yeah, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe it. That's why affirmations mostly I don't think are done well. You have to believe, you have to say a thought that you believe, but one that achieves the feeling or result that you want. So you can choose them carefully. And again, we can go back to those words, it's possible, or right now, or, any of those kinds of. Another one that's great is, can I just work for the next 10 minutes? Can I just make one phone call and ask this investor this thing? Can I just wait 10 minutes before I have the second cookie? Can I just, whatever your goal is, and then asking yourself, can I just, is a powerful question.
Yeah, really powerful. I remember working with a sports psychologist when I was singing, and I had time because I wasn't rehearsing every day or all hours of every day. And I was in a city in Europe that had a great department. And I sat with him and he said to me, well, what do you want to work on? I said, well, I think there's something really similar in performance to athletics. And here's what I experience right before I go on stage. And I'm assuming the basketball player has the same thing. And we started working on these different processes. And that's when I was introduced not by name, but by practice to thought work. And some of it was thought stopping. And it was based on the same principle of, here's my current thought. I loathe, I am, I fill in the blank. And then the stop was a shouted stop in my head, presumably not allowed.
Yeah.
But it was literally shouting stop after that, creating that moment when the kid isn't running around with the scissors. That I actually feel it when I do it. I feel like it's almost a settling, almost a physical and visual settling of particles in my being.
Yeah.
And then I replace it with the positive. And what we did at the time was script the negative thought to make it reliable.
Yeah.
So it's not random. And then use the stop and then go to the positive thought. And then eventually we moved away from the paper. In other words, get to where we could habituate it. And I found it became a life tool. It wasn't just temporary.
Yeah. I have in front of me in my desk at home, like where I work, is Post-it notes with some thoughts that I want to practice thinking. And I encourage everybody to just write down the thought that you need to practice and put it where you're going to see it all the time. So next to your toothbrush, in your underwear drawer, wherever you're going to see it, on your fridge. But it is really helpful, like when we have a visual reminder of what we want to start to live and believe and know with a capital K, like knowing, you have to remind yourself of it. And so that is very helpful. But another thing that you just reminded me of is the practice of visioning, which is the name of my company, Abbie Schiller Visioning. And so I think that sports coaches do this a lot before a big game, in that you practice the way you want the game to go, and you practice making that shot and how it feels, and you practice the crowd, you imagine the crowd cheering. You can do this in everyday life. If you have a big meeting, or if you are trying to achieve something in your life, you can practice seeing it from a point of yourself in the future in which it's already achieved. And how you can go back and imagine, what were all the steps that you took? What were all the obstacles that you overcame? What were all the thoughts that helped you get there? How does it feel to have been in the future? What are you wearing? Who are you with? How are you living? And that future vision, that visioning exercise is really powerful, because our brains need kind of a GPS to go towards.
Yeah.
And most of us never answer the question of, what do you want? What is it that you want? What kind of a life do you want? What what would make you like your life? And when we can answer those questions and then see that result in our mind's eye, we're more than 40% of the way there. It's just like, that's why, vision boards can be very powerful. You remind yourself visually of what you want and then work towards that.
Which came full circle to what is the life that we like.
Yeah.
What about you personally, if you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Professionally, personally.
Sure.
How are you developing that sense of self and that life that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah. I mean, ever since I was 8 and hearing about all the adults who didn't like their lives, I think that for me, it's been really my mission to live a life that I liked. And that has looked different in different chapters of my life. And I think for everybody listening, it will feel that everybody will have a different answer to what it looks like to live a life that you like. Personally, I think it looks like working in something that feels very purposeful and meaningful to me, in which I'm making a difference in people's lives, and not just with the people that I'm working with, but I'm helping them change their lives, which is changing their families' lives. Sure. It's changing how much they earn. It's changing their relationship to estranged family members or to people who have passed even. I'm helping people rewrite their stories. So it feels very meaningful to me and to them. And a life that I like is filled with joy.
Not fun.
Fun for sure. In fact, last year, my motto was random acts of fun, because I had never before prioritized fun. I always thought fun was frivolous. And as I'm a driven hard worker. And so I felt like the balance was a little off and that I needed to actively pursue fun. So I did. I started learning pickleball. I went out karaokeing. I hosted parties more often. I traveled more. I actively had a year of random acts of fun, and it was life-changing. So I've kept that. But, I think that everybody needs to just kind of identify what is meaningful to them. For me, soul-filling is wonderful conversations, playing cards with my husband when my son goes to bed, connecting deeply, laughing together as a family, travel, just mindfulness for me even. I practice gratitude, which has helped me really appreciate everything in my life and liking what I have even more. And there's science behind having a good life. If you're interested, you want to share the science?
Sure, of course.
So the research on how to have a good life is from Jonathan Fields. He's also a podcaster and an author and a researcher. And he says that in order to have a good life, there are 3 buckets that need to be full. One of them is your vitality bucket, which is your wellness, your mental, physical, spiritual, emotional wellness, your sense of possibility, wonder, and awe. The middle bucket is your connection bucket, which is how meaningfully connected do you feel to your family, your community, your coworkers. Also, how meaningfully connected do you feel to yourself, which I think is so crucial. What is the experience of living with yourself? And you'll like to hear this, how meaningfully connected do you feel to something larger than yourself? The universe, God, spirits, ancestors, whatever it is. Meaningful is the main word there in terms of connection, how meaningfully connected, because many of us can live in homes in which we feel totally disconnected or unseen or no sense of belonging. Sure. And then the third bucket is contribution. How do you feel you contribute to the world in ways that may outlast you? What matters in your life? And if you think about liking your life and with those 3 buckets as the framework, I think it's a really easy way to identify areas that are lacking in your life. And Jonathan Fields says that the act of having a good life is the act of replenishing those buckets because they automatically drip.
It's not one and done.
It's not. No, in every day, there's little drips that happen from all of those buckets, and we have to actively replenish them.
It sounds like a lot of the findings of Arthur Brooks also on what makes a happy life, a meaningful life. He also talks about transcendent meaning, living for something larger than yourself, whatever that means to you, contribution, generous living. and the self-care and the continued growth.
Vitality.
Yeah, I was thinking about where I am. So there's certain points as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, how well am I filling those buckets? But then I think about people who have retired by choice or circumstance. And I think sometimes the crisis is, what is a life I like when I no longer have the things I like to do?
Because they're missing the third bucket, which is contribution. And they have, I actually have had a lot of conversations with people who have retired or have parents who are retiring who are entering depression. When they are tied to, when their identity has been tied to their career, and this is especially true for men, I think, for various reasons. But when you have especially tied your identity to career and then you no longer have that career, your contribution bucket has plummeted. And when one bucket plummets, it brings the other two buckets down very rapidly. And you have to go into a triage mode in which you make a plan. You stop the drain and you make a plan for how to rebuild.
Yeah.
And that's actually step 2 in my course. The first one is decide the life that you want. The second is make a plan for it. Do you want to know the other 3 steps?
I do.
So third step is understand how to think and feel on purpose.
Okay.
Learn those
Which we've been
tools.
discussing.
The fourth is take action. And the fifth is the real secret sauce to all of it, which is enjoy the process. Because when we decide what we want, that's 1%. And when we achieve what we want, that's 1%. But life is lived in the 98% in between. 98%. And if you're constantly waiting to get there to like your life, you're not going to like your life. If you constantly think, once I earn this amount, or once I marry someone, or once I get this job out of my way, or once the boss leaves, or whatever it is, then I'll be happy. You're prolonging your joy. You're prolonging the quality of your life, hinging upon something that you think will happen. And instead, you can learn how to enjoy, or at least acknowledge and honor what is, instead of arguing with what should be or what will be, or waiting for that.
I really hope people listen to this, as I will numerous times, because there's so much in it. I'm really grateful to you. I've learned a lot. I've really enjoyed you and being across the table from you. And I'm thinking and thinking and thinking as I'm listening to what you're saying, and thinking I can't imagine that there's anybody who didn't benefit from this hour. Can't imagine, unless they didn't have sound on, because there's so much richness here.
We went over a lot.
We did.
We went over a lot.
So that's why I think people need to listen again or read the transcript to go, oh, what was she actually saying?
Yes.
How do I apply that? And the ultimate answer is reach out to you.
Well, for sure. I'm available, and I have a lot of free tools for people. I'm on Instagram. I have an amazing private but open to everybody coaching platform on text. So you can go to my website and learn how to find me that way.
Yeah, good website.
Thank you. Or I have the free tool as well, Change One Thing, which is a free teaching to learn this a little bit deeper. And
there are plenty of people, in case anybody isn't convinced, there are plenty of brief affidavits from people with whom you've worked who have said, look, this is real. This has made an impact in my life, a positive one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Our producer and editor is Jonah Lee Paz. Our musical theme is composed by Amotz Plessner, and our logo, graphic design by Janice Rudnunski. Find us wherever you find your podcasts.